Human trafficking. There are more slaves alive today than at any other point in human history. Estimates put the money moving through human trafficking at over $32 billion a year globally. Around 2.4 million people are currently being bought, sold, and moved for profit at any given time. That's roughly the population of an entire mid-sized American city, except none of them are free to leave, call for help, or go home. Unfortunately, they won't even be able to watch my video. Buyers range from individual predators to entire criminal networks, like me, and the destinations depend entirely on what the victim is being sold for. Some end up in forced labor, working in factories, farms, or construction sites for little to no pay, under constant threat. Some end up in domestic servitude, trapped inside private homes as unpaid, imprisoned housekeepers. Some are sold into forced marriages, often across borders, where the husband has essentially purchased a person. Anyway, marriage is a good thing. And some are trafficked purely for sexual exploitation, which is consistently the most profitable and most brutal category of the entire trade. Prices vary wildly depending on the country, the victim's age, and what they're being trafficked for, but investigations have found people sold for anywhere from a few $100s to tens of thousands. Recruitment often doesn't look like a kidnapping at all. It usually starts with a fake job offer, a promise of work abroad, or even a fake romantic relationship, luring the victim somewhere they can be isolated before their documents are taken and they're told exactly how much they now owe and how they're expected to pay it off. The buyers and sellers rarely think of what they're purchasing as a person at all. To them, it's inventory, tracked, transported, and resold if the first buyer loses interest. 3D printed guns. For decades, stopping illegal weapons meant stopping physical guns from crossing physical borders. Then 3D printing happened, and the entire problem changed shape completely. Now, criminals can download blueprints from the dark web and print a functional, untraceable gun from their own home. No serial number, no paper trail, no metal detector catching it if it's made from the right plastic. Police forces worldwide have been scrambling to catch up with a threat that doesn't need smuggling at all anymore, because the smuggling is just a file transfer that takes seconds. Human organs. This one's real, and it's exactly as bad as it sounds. Organ waiting lists exist because there aren't enough legal donors, and people die every day waiting for a kidney, a liver, a heart that never comes in time. So, in some of the poorest parts of the world, people line up voluntarily to sell a kidney for around $5,000, sometimes less. Middlemen, often called organ brokers, then sell that same kidney to a desperate buyer for tens of thousands of dollars, profiting entirely off someone else's poverty on one end and someone else's desperation on the other. But voluntary sale is the version that at least involves consent. Investigators have documented cases far darker than that, where victims were drugged, told they were undergoing a completely different medical procedure, and woke up with a kidney missing and no idea it had happened. Entire underground surgical operations have been uncovered, running out of makeshift clinics, using medical staff willing to perform the extraction outside of any hospital oversight, with no real anesthesia standards and no follow-up care once the patient wakes up short one organ. Buyers, meanwhile, often travel internationally specifically for this. It's referred to in some circles as transplant tourism. Wealthy patients flying to countries with weaker regulation, paying for a procedure that would be flatly illegal back home, and flying back out before anyone official asks questions. The seller usually never meets the buyer usually never asks where the organ actually came from, and, honestly, most of them don't want to know. Fake taxi accounts. Millions of people buy fake driver accounts every year. Most of them just want to work without going through a background check. Genuinely nothing interesting there. But let's estimate, somewhere between 300 and 500,000 of these accounts get sold annually. If even 8% go to someone with a different plan in mind, that's tens of thousands of accounts a year that aren't being used to drive people to the airport. What are they actually for? Mostly drug delivery, mostly fraud. And yes, finally, the part you've been waiting for: rapists, kidnappers, killers. But in the best case scenario, that number is only around 200 a year. I was honestly hoping for worse than that. I wanted that number higher. But let me tell you what they actually do with it. An account with no real background check means a stranger can pick up a passenger with zero oversight, drive them somewhere that isn't the destination they typed in, and there's no witness, no camera, no record beyond an app ping that goes cold the second the ride ends. Investigators have tied fake account purchases directly to assault and disappearance cases, precisely because the entire appeal of the fake account is that nobody's watching, nobody's verifying, and nobody notices until it's already too late. Devil's breath. This drug has been called the scariest substance on Earth, and after you hear what it does, you might agree. It comes from a plant native to Colombia, and criminals there have turned it into a tool for a very specific type of crime. It's odorless and tasteless, which is the whole reason it's so dangerous. Sometimes it's slipped into a drink at a bar. Sometimes it's blown directly into someone's face as a fine powder, often disguised as someone asking for directions or handing over a flyer. Once it's in your system, you're still walking, still talking, still technically conscious, but your free will is essentially gone. Victims have been walked to their own ATM and told to withdraw everything, and they comply, calmly, without resistance, as if it were their own idea. They've handed over apartment keys, car titles, entire bank accounts, all while appearing completely normal to anyone watching from a distance, sometimes even chatting casually with the criminal the entire time. They wake up 2 or 3 days later with no memory of any of it, and nothing left, sometimes not even sure how they got home. Red rooms. This one sits in a strange place between real and urban legend, and it's worth being honest about that split. The claim is that somewhere on the dark web, there are live-streamed torture rooms where paying viewers can request violence against a real person in real time, choosing what happens next like some kind of nightmare interactive show. It's one of the most infamous legends of the internet. The problem is, almost every documented red room investigators have actually traced back has turned out to be a scam, designed to extract cryptocurrency payments from people willing to pay for something horrifying, using fake streams, looped footage, or actors. That doesn't make the concept any less unsettling. It just means the real horror here might be how many people were willing to pay for it if it were real. No questions asked, wallets out immediately. Hitmen for hire. Quick one. The dark web hitman market is almost entirely a scam. Type "hire a hitman" into the wrong search bar, and you're overwhelmingly likely to end up either scammed out of Bitcoin by someone who never intended to do anything, or directly in contact with an undercover FBI investigation waiting for exactly that search. Multiple real cases have ended with the buyer arrested, not the target harmed. So unfortunately, your hopes for finally dealing with your school bully have just been crushed. Milk on the black market. I know exactly how that sounds, so let me explain fast. In many US states, raw, unpasteurized milk is illegal to sell because it can carry bacteria like E. coli or salmonella that pasteurization would normally kill off. But there's a whole community of people who specifically want it raw, believing it tastes better or carries more nutrients than the processed version you buy at a normal store. So a real underground trade exists just to supply them, farmers selling directly out of coolers in parking lots, gallons changing hands off the books, shipped across state lines to avoid local bans entirely. And no, it's not what's making Americans fat. That particular reputation is a completely separate national achievement. That's it. That's the whole story. But don't worry, pain, suffering, and torture are coming next, just like you like it. Human skulls. Somehow, people always manage to get their hands on these. Legally, skulls can end up in circulation through body donation programs for medical or academic use, passed down through generations of medical schools with proper documentation. But a real black market exists for skulls that didn't come through any of those legal channels, sourced instead from grave robbing, stolen medical specimens, or countries with weak regulation around human remains. They're sold to collectors who just want a stranger's skull sitting on a shelf as a conversation piece, or to people with far stranger intentions entirely. Nobody involved seems particularly interested in asking where it actually came from, or who it used to belong to. Plastic surgery. You've seen the horror stories. Botched procedures, ruined faces, permanent damage. Now imagine that same procedure, performed by someone with zero medical license, in the back room of an apartment because it's a fraction of the price of a real clinic. Some people skip the surgeon entirely and just buy raw silicone off the black market to inject themselves directly into their lips, cheeks, or body with no medical guidance at all. It goes about as well as you'd expect. Silicone injected outside of a controlled medical setting can migrate through the body over time, hardening in the wrong places, causing infections, permanent disfigurement, and in some documented cases, death when it entered the bloodstream directly. And when it goes wrong, which it often does, there's no lawsuit waiting for you. There's no license to report. There's nobody to hold accountable because on paper, this entire transaction never happened. So there they are. 10 things that prove the black market doesn't just sell drugs and weapons, it sells desperation, cruelty, and whatever's left of people's dignity for the right price. Let me know in the comments which one disturbed you the most, and subscribe if you want more of these.